They called him the Dragon King, not because he commanded dragons, but because men feared his silence. In court, it was power. In war, it was control. But in marriage, it was distance. There was one woman who did not tremble beneath it. One woman who looked past the crown and saw the man beneath. And when she knelt to protect him, he could have spoken. One truth, one sentence. He chose silence instead. And that silence nearly cost him his queen. Chapter 1. The king who never knelt. Valtheris was not built to be beautiful. It was built to endure. Dark granite walls rose from the cliffs like something carved by war itself. High above, dragon banners snapped in the winter wind. Black wings stretched wide over crimson fields. They were not symbols of wonder. They were warnings. The dragons were history. The king was flesh. King Alaric of Valtheris stood before his throne as the morning council assembled, hands clasped behind his back, expression unreadable. He did not shift, did not frown, did not raise his voice. He listened. And that was what unsettled men most. Silence in his hands was not absence. It was pressure. "My king," Lord Halvern began carefully, "the northern provinces request reduced winter levies. The harvest was thin." Alaric did not answer. The pause lengthened. The chamber tightened. At last he spoke. "The harvest was thin," he repeated evenly. "And yet your personal granaries remain full." Halvern swallowed. "For the security of my people." "Your people," Alaric replied, "are mine. No anger, no volume, only certainty." The matter ended. That was why they called him the Dragon King, not because he breathed fire, because he never flinched, because nothing in him appeared uncertain, nothing except. His gaze flickered, briefly, toward the far end of the hall. The queen's seat remained empty during council. Tradition demanded it, but he was aware of her presence in the castle all the same. He always was. Queen Elowyn stood at the southern window of their private chamber, watching pale light spill across the valley below. Smoke curled from distant chimneys. The world seemed softer from this height. 3 winters had passed since she had entered Valtheris as bride. 3 years of alliance, 3 years of shared duty, 3 years without an heir. The court had begun to whisper. She felt it in pauses, in glances, in carefully worded inquiries. But whispers did not wound her. His distance did. The door opened behind her. She did not turn. She knew his step. "Council was resolved?" she asked gently. "It was handled." She turned then. Without armor, he seemed less statue and more man. Dark tunic, broad shoulders, silver threading faintly through his temples. She studied him. He avoided her eyes. "You are troubled," she said quietly. "I am king." Not an answer. She crossed the room slowly. "There are whispers," she said. "There are always whispers. These question succession." His jaw tightened. He turned toward the hearth. "Let them question." "It will not remain questioning," she replied. "It will become suggestion." He did not respond. She stepped closer. 3 years is not uncommon. I am aware. Physicians can be summoned again. His shoulders stiffened. "I have summoned them." Her breath caught. "And they advise patience?" The word was measured, controlled, but something beneath it felt strained. "Did they say anything more?" she asked softly. Silence. The fire cracked between them. "Elowen," he said at last. "This requires no further discussion." She held his gaze. "Marriage does." The words lingered. He looked at her then, really looked, and for a brief moment something flickered in his eyes. Not anger, fear. It vanished almost immediately. "You are not the failure," he said abruptly. The word landed between them. Failure. Her pulse stilled. "I did not say I was." He turned away again, and she understood. This was not rejection, it was concealment. He would rather let the world believe she was lacking than allow himself to be seen as diminished. The realization cut deeper than accusation. "You defend me before the court," she said quietly. "I hear it, as I should. But you withdraw from me." His voice hardened. "I stand alone because I must." "In council," she said carefully. "Not here." He said nothing. That silence felt different. Not powerful. Defensive. She stepped back slightly. "If there is a burden," she said, "let me carry it beside you." The offer was gentle. It terrified him, because to accept would require confession, and confession would require fracture. He had been raised to endure, not to break. "This conversation ends," he said evenly. Not loud. Final. He extinguished the fire and left the chamber colder than before. That night, they lay in the same bed separated by inches that felt like distance carved in stone. He stared into darkness. She lay awake, feeling the slow erosion of something more fragile than love. Trust. He almost spoke her name, almost told her what the physicians had implied, almost admitted that the fault might be his. But kings did not confess uncertainty. Kings endured it. So he remained silent. And beside him, the woman who would have carried any burden at his side began to feel alone. Chapter 2. The weight of a crown in Valtheris. Strength was inherited, not suggested, not negotiated, inherited. The portraits of former dragon kings lined the western gallery, stern faces preserved in oil and shadow. Conquerors, fathers of sons, builders of legacy. Alaric walked that corridor alone, long after midnight. Torchlight flickered across stone as he passed beneath the gaze of men who had never appeared uncertain. His father's portrait hung at the center. King Theron, unyielding, severe. "A king does not confess weakness," his father had once told him. "He buries it." Alaric had buried many things. Pain from battle, doubt before war, fear during winter campaigns. But this could not be buried without consequence. The physicians had arrived quietly 3 weeks earlier. No formal summons, no public notice. Elwyn received them with calm dignity. Alaric waited outside the chamber while they examined her. He told himself it was for her privacy. In truth, he could not bear to watch hope measured like livestock. When they emerged, their expressions were careful, too careful. "Her Majesty is in sound health," the eldest physician said. "There is no obstruction." Relief came first. Brief. Sharp. Then the physician hesitated. "And the king?" he asked gently. Alaric did not flinch. "Proceed." The examination was clinical, humbling, silent. Afterward, the verdict came in restrained language. "Your Majesty's vitality appears diminished. Speak plainly," Alaric said. A pause. "It may be unlikely that the Queen will conceive." Unlikely. The word hollowed the air. He dismissed them, paid them, bound them to silence under threat of treason. Then he remained alone in the chamber long after the torches burned low. Unlikely. A dragon king without an heir, not merely unfortunate, unstable. He imagined the court discovering it, northern lords circling, alliances shifting, whispers growing sharper. A king who cannot produce succession invites replacement. Shame burned hotter than fear, not because he might fail himself, because he might fail history. And so he chose silence. Eluin noticed the shift almost immediately. He lingered longer in council, returned to their chambers later, slept rigidly as though proximity required effort. At first, she believed she had pressed too gently upon the matter of heirs. Perhaps her reassurances had sounded like pity. She approached him one evening as he stood before the hearth. "You summoned physicians," she said. "Yes. And?" "They advised patience." The same word as before. Measured. Controlled. But something beneath it was strained. "Did they find fault?" she asked. "No." The answer came quickly. "In either of us." Silence. The fire cracked softly. "Eluin," he said, "this matter requires no further discussion. It requires honesty." The word struck him harder than accusation. He turned. There it was again, that flicker in his eyes. Pain. Gone as quickly as it appeared. "You are not the failure," he said. She stilled. "I did not say I was." He exhaled sharply. "I will not have you diminished by speculation." "Then let me stand beside you in it." The offer was steady, sincere, and unbearable. Because to accept would mean telling her the truth, and if she looked at him with sympathy. He did not know if he could endure that. "I stand alone because I am king," he said. "And here?" she asked softly. "Are you king here as well?" The question lodged beneath his ribs. He did not know how to answer it. So he did what he understood best. He retreated. "This conversation ends." He left her standing before the firelight. Later, alone in his study, the sealed parchment lay upon his desk. He had not burned it. He could not. It felt like proof of fracture. He pressed his palms against the wood and bowed his head. He had faced enemy blades without hesitation, had watched men die and remained steady. But this quiet limitation, this private inadequacy, it frightened him, not because it weakened his body, because it threatened his legacy. He imagined telling her, imagined saying the words plainly, "It is I. The fault is mine." He imagined her reaching for him. And the thought terrified him more than rebellion, because if he allowed himself to break before her, he would no longer be the unshakable king Valtheris required, and if the court sensed weakness, they would circle. And kings surrounded by doubt did not reign long. So he convinced himself silence was protection. Let the court assume what it would. Let them pity her gently. Better that than watch them measure him. But he did not see what that protection was costing. Across the corridor, Eluin lay awake. She did not feel rejected. She felt excluded. There was something he carried alone, something he would not entrust to her. And in a marriage forged for alliance and strengthened by affection, exclusion is more corrosive than anger. In the darkness, two people lay separated by inches. By pride. By fear. By words never spoken. And somewhere beneath the stone foundations of Valtheris, beneath banners and portraits and inherited expectation, a fracture had begun. Not in the throne, in the silence between them. Chapter 3. The Queen's sacrifice rumors in Valtheris did not arrive loudly. They arrived politely, with lowered voices, with careful phrasing, with concern disguised as loyalty. It began in corridors, then in the council chamber. The northern lords required reassurance. The kingdom required succession. The dragon throne required certainty. No one accused the queen directly. They did not need to. Silence had already assigned blame. Eluin felt it before it reached formal discussion. Lady Maris bowed a little deeper than usual. Two knights stopped speaking when she entered the hall. Pity replaced warmth, and pity she knew could be weaponized. Alaric defended her publicly. When Lord Damaris suggested that strategic remarriage might secure stability, the king's response was immediate. There will be no second marriage. His voice was level. My queen stands beside me. The chamber fell silent. But later, in private, he did not stand beside her at all. He withdrew. And she began to understand. This was not indifference. It was shame. The formal proposal arrived 3 days later, sealed in gray wax, presented with bowed head. For the stability of the northern provinces, Lord Halvern said carefully, it may be wise to grant Her Majesty honorable residence elsewhere. An abbey, perhaps, with full dignity. Honorable removal, elegant exile. Alaric's fingers tightened around the parchment. There will be no exile, he said. But the chamber did not relax, because refusal without solution only delayed fracture. That evening, Elowin went to the chapel alone. No banners hung there. No dragon crests. Only stone worn smooth by generations of kneeling. She understood what Alaric would never admit. If he revealed the truth, if he exposed his limitation, the court would not respond with mercy. They would respond with calculation. If she remained and pressure grew, the northern houses might push harder, force alliances, test loyalties. He would bleed in ways war had never made him bleed, and he would never forgive himself for it. So she made her decision, not from weakness, from clarity. If a sacrifice was required, she would choose it, before it was forced upon them both. The full council assembled 2 mornings later. Dragon banners hung heavy above the throne. Torches cast shifting shadows across stone. Elowen entered in full regalia, gold circlet, velvet mantle, dragon crest embroidered over her breast. Murmurs rippled. Alaric's gaze sharpened the moment he saw her. She walked past him without hesitation and stopped before the dais. Then she knelt. The sound of fabric against stone echoed through the chamber. Elowen, he said quietly. She did not rise. My lords, she began, her voice steady, carrying cleanly to the edges of the hall. Valtheris deserves certainty. No one moved. The absence of an heir invites doubt. Alaric descended 1 step from the throne. Stand. She continued. I release His Majesty from the burden of my barrenness. The words struck the hall like iron. Gasps followed. Whispers. Alaric crossed the remaining distance in 2 strides. Enough. His voice was low, dangerous. But she would not look at him. I request leave to reside at Avonmere Abbey, she said, so that the king may take a fertile bride and secure the realm. Silence fell. Heavy. Final. He could stop this. He could speak the truth. He could say the word that burned in his throat. Mine. The fault is mine. But he felt the weight of every portrait in the Western Gallery, every ancestor who had secured succession through strength. If he exposed himself now, the court would not simply pity. They would measure. And a king measured too closely invites challenge. Elowen, he said again, quieter. She leaned slightly toward him, speaking only for his ears. Do not strip me of this dignity, she whispered. Let me give you this. The words struck harder than accusation. She believed she was protecting him. She was. That was what made it unbearable. Lord Halvern stepped forward cautiously. If this is Her Majesty's will? It is, she said before Alaric could answer. His hesitation lasted only seconds, but seconds were enough. The decree was drafted before sunset, signed before twilight. sealed by nightfall. She would depart within the fortnight. In their private chamber, attendants dismissed. The silence felt different. Not defensive. Resigned. Eluin stood before the mirror and removed her crown herself. Alaric watched from the doorway. "You need not do this," he said. "It is already done. You assume too much. Then tell me I am wrong." He opened his mouth. The truth pressed forward. The confession waited. "Say it. Tell her the physicians were wrong about her. Tell her the fault lies with you. Tell her you were afraid." But pride wrapped around his throat like iron. Kings did not confess incapacity. Kings endured it. "I would have borne any burden beside you," she said quietly. The words were not angry. They were wounded. He stepped forward, desperation cracking through composure. Elone. But she had already set the crown upon the table, already extinguished one candle. The chamber dimmed. Between them stretched more than distance. It was choice. He had chosen silence, and she had chosen sacrifice. And for the first time in his reign, the Dragon King understood something war had never taught him. You can command loyalty. You can command fear. But you cannot command a heart once it begins to withdraw. Chapter 4. The Breaking of a King. The night after the decree, the throne room stood empty. No lords. No petitions. No witnesses. Only the Dragon King. Alaric stood at the base of the dais, not seated upon the throne but facing it, as though it belonged to someone else. The iron circlet rested on the carved dragon at the arm of the throne. Torchlight flickered along its edges, throwing long shadows across the stone. He had commanded armies without trembling. He had ridden into battle without hesitation. But he had let his queen kneel. He had let her take blame that was not hers. He had let silence speak in his place. The word surfaced slowly. Coward. It had never applied to him before. His father's voice echoed in memory. A king does not confess weakness. He buries it. Alaric had buried many things, but burying this had nearly cost him his marriage. He turned from the throne and crossed the chamber slowly. Outside, wind tore the dragon banners. Their fabric snapped sharply in the dark. Power stretched too tightly will always tear. In the days since the decree, the court had shifted, not openly, but subtly. Northern lords sent polite inquiries. Names of potential brides slipped into correspondence. He answered none. But his silence no longer felt controlled. It felt suffocating. Eluin's chambers had begun to empty. Trunks lined the walls. Travel garments folded neatly. The scent of lavender lingered in the air. Alaric stood outside her door longer than he would ever admit. At last he entered. She stood at the window in a simple gown, travel-ready. Her crown lay on the table behind her. "I depart at dawn," she said without turning. "I know." She faced him. "Have you come to rescind the decree?" "No." Honesty, at least. A small, almost imperceptible tightening in her posture followed. "You believe I agreed too easily," he said. "I believe," she replied carefully, "that you chose silence again." The words struck clean. "You assume I do not suffer this," he said. "I assume you would rather suffer alone than be seen." He held her gaze. "I am afraid," he said. The admission surprised even him. She stilled. "Afraid of what?" "Of standing before you diminished." The room felt smaller. "You were never diminished to me," she said. "You do not understand what this crown demands." "Then tell me." The request was steady. He exhaled slowly. "I summoned physicians," he began. "I know. They found no fault in you." Her fingers tightened slightly at her sides. "And in you?" There it was. the fracture he had avoided naming. In me, he said carefully, they found limitation. The word felt insufficient. They believe I may not father a child. The confession settled heavily between them. She did not recoil. She stepped closer. That is why you withdrew, she said softly. Yes, not because you did not want me. His composure cracked. I have never not wanted you. The truth came rough, unguarded. She closed the distance between them. You thought I would see you as less. I thought the world would. And so you let me bear it. He did not deny it. I believed it was protection. It was isolation, she replied. He felt the truth of that settle into his bones. He had not protected her. He had excluded her. I do not know how to be king and man at once, he admitted. It was not eloquent. It was not strong. It was real. She studied him carefully. You do not have to choose, she said. He searched her face for pity, found none, only understanding. You would have carried this with me, he asked quietly. Yes. The certainty in her voice broke something open inside him. He stepped closer, the distance between them dissolving at last. I let you kneel, he said. Yes. I let them believe it was you. Yes. And you would have endured it. Yes. Each answer struck deeper than accusation. I was wrong, he said. The words felt foreign, but necessary. She inhaled slowly. Then do not let it end this way. Dawn's first light began to touch the tower walls beyond the window. Departure waited, but so did choice. He looked at her, not as queen, not as solution, as partner. I do not know what comes next, he said. Then we face it without silence, she replied. Outside, wind pulled at the dragon banners once more. Inside, something shifted. For the first time since the physician's verdict, Alaric did not feel the need to hide. He felt exposed, but not diminished, and that difference changed everything. Chapter 5. The truth before the throne. Dawn arrived, cold and pale. Frost clung to the courtyard stones, horses stamped in restless clouds of breath. Servants secured travel trunks with quiet efficiency. Word had spread. The queen would depart. Eloan stood at the top of the eastern steps in a deep blue cloak. She wore no crown. Below, guards formed a modest escort, not ceremonial, somber. Several northern lords had gathered, their expressions composed, their condolences carefully arranged. Your Majesty, Lord Halvern said to her, bowing, your dignity honors Valtheris. Dignity. As though removal were noble. As though she had not chosen exile to protect the man standing in the archway behind her. Alaric watched from shadow. He had not slept. Confession in private was one thing. Confession before the realm was another. If she left now, knowing the truth, it would no longer be sacrifice. It would be consequence. The gates creaked open. The carriage waited beyond. Close the gates, Alaric commanded. The courtyard froze. Halvern blinked. Your Majesty? Council. Now. Within minutes, the great hall filled. Dragon banners hung motionless above. Torches burned despite the morning light. Eloan stood at the base of the dais. Alaric ascended alone. He did not sit. He did not wear the crown. You have requested certainty, he began. No one interrupted. You have questioned succession. Measured silence. You have suggested honorable removal. Halvern bowed slightly. For stability, Your Majesty. Alaric stepped down from the dais. Not toward the lords. Toward her. This woman, he said evenly, has done nothing to deserve your pity. Eloan's fingers tightened beneath her cloak. She offered to step aside to protect this throne. A murmur rippled. Halvern cleared his throat. Her Majesty's barrenness is not hers. The words cut through the hall. Stillness followed. Alaric felt the weight of every portrait in the western gallery pressing against his spine. This was the fracture made visible. The physicians found no fault in the queen, he said clearly. Eyes shifted. And in your Majesty? Halvern asked carefully. Alaric held his gaze. In me. A ripple of shock moved through the chamber. He did not look away. I will not discard my queen to preserve pride, he continued. If there is blame, it rests here. He struck his chest once. The sound echoed against stone. You may question succession, he said. You may question strategy, but you will not question her worth. The hall remained silent. He turned slightly toward Elwyn. I chose silence, he said, voice lower now. And that silence wounded her. The admission hung heavy. A king who hides weakness invites rebellion, he continued. A king who confronts it does not. It was not defiance, it was ownership. Halvern bowed deeply. Valtheris stands with its king. One by one, the others followed. Not because they pitied him, because he had not flinched. Power shifted in the room. Not diminished, redefined. Alaric turned back to the throne. This time he placed the iron circlet upon his head, not as shield, as responsibility. There will be no exile, he said. The queen remains. No one challenged it, because he had already risked the greater exposure. When the hall emptied, only the two of them remained. The banners stirred faintly overhead. Elowyn studied him carefully. You did not have to do that, she said quietly. Yes, he replied. I did. For the kingdom, for you. The simplicity of it removed any grandeur. He stepped down from the dais and extended his hand, not commanding, inviting. She placed her hand in his. Warm, certain. I was afraid of being seen as less, he said. And now? She asked. Now I am seen. He searched her face for doubt. Found none. I do not know what path we take next, he admitted. Then we choose it, she replied. Together. The word settled into him differently than it had before. Not as comfort, as strength. Outside, the gates of Valtheris opened once more. Not for departure, for continuation. The Dragon King had revealed fracture and remained standing. That was something even his ancestors had never taught him. Chapter 6. The man who finally knelt. Valtheris did not tremble after the confession. No rebellion rose. No alliance fractured. The kingdom endured. But something within its walls had shifted. Not in the throne, in the man who sat upon it. Council resumed. Trade continued. Messengers rode beneath dragon banners that still snapped in the wind. Yet the tone had changed. The lords who once measured him for weakness now regarded him differently. He had revealed limitation, and had not fallen. But transformation in a king does not complete itself in a council chamber. It completes in quiet rooms. The chapel stood still in the late afternoon light. Candles burned low. Stone walls held centuries of whispered prayers. Elowyn knelt alone, hands loosely folded, her thoughts steady but not untouched. Truth had been spoken, but truth does not erase hurt. Footsteps sounded behind her, measured, familiar. She did not turn. He stopped several steps away. Elowyn. She rose slowly and faced him. He wore no crown, no armor, only a dark tunic, sleeves rolled back. He looked less like a ruler, more like a man deciding something difficult. I have stood before armies without hesitation, he said quietly. I have given orders that altered borders. She waited. But there is something I have not done. He stepped closer. Then, deliberately, he knelt. The motion was controlled. Not dramatic, not symbolic for anyone else. For her, she inhaled sharply. Alaric. He looked up at her. Not from a throne, from stone. I let you kneel alone, he said. Before the court, before the kingdom. His voice did not waver. I let you carry shame that was mine. The words hung heavy between them. I was taught that bending meant breaking, he continued. That yielding meant weakness, a breath. But refusing to bend nearly broke us. The admission was not polished. It was honest. I do not ask forgiveness as king, he said. I ask it as your husband. The word changed everything. Husband, not ruler, not dragon king. Man. Eowyn stepped closer. You think kneeling restores what was wounded? She asked gently. No, he answered. Truth does. She studied him. The silver at his temples, the lines carved by responsibility, the steadiness in his gaze that now held no shield. You wounded me, she said quietly. I know. You chose silence when I asked for trust. I know. And yet, she continued, you chose differently before the court. Yes. Silence settled. But this one was shared. Not defensive. Not guarded. She lowered herself slowly until she knelt before him as well. Now they were eye to eye. Equal. You were never diminished to me, she said. Only distant. His throat tightened. I was afraid you would see me as less. I saw you as alone. The distinction struck deeper than accusation. He reached for her hands carefully, giving her space to withdraw. She did not. I do not know what future we build, he said. Whether an heir comes or does not. She nodded. But I will not measure my worth, or yours, by what fate withholds. The vow was simple, radical. She allowed a faint smile. That is the man I married. Not the conqueror. Not the legend. The man. He rose first, then helped her to her feet. Not lifting her, not pulling, but steadying. Outside the chapel windows, the sky softened toward evening gold. Dragon banners rested briefly between gusts of wind. I once believed power meant never revealing fear, he said quietly. And now, she asked. Now I believe power is standing within it and remaining. She held his gaze. You did. Because he had. He had stood in confession, in shame, in vulnerability, and remained king. They stepped from the chapel together. Not ruler and consort. Partners. Above them, the dragon crest carved into the tower caught the fading light. A symbol of fire, of legacy, of endurance. But beneath it walked a man who had learned something his ancestors never had. Strength was not the absence of fracture. It was the courage to be seen within it. And in choosing to kneel when it mattered most, he had not lost his crown. He had finally earned it.